Good evening. Welcome to the Big Story. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho. And I'm Shawn Yao.
Tonight's big stories: the Agriculture Department declares a food emergency on rice, allowing the release of buffer stocks to help pull down the extraordinary increase in the price of the staple.
In an exclusive interview, Vice President Sara Duterte says yes, she is seriously considering running for president in 2028, but she has not yet decided on who to endorse this year.
And the trade war initiated by the United States has put Canada, Mexico, and China on retaliatory mode. We will speak with economist JC Punongbayan about its potential impact on the Philippines.
Well, it's been 2 months and a day since the first impeachment complaint against Vice President Sara Duterte was filed at the House of Representatives.
Well, 2 more complaints later, the lower chamber now says it is ready to transmit the documents to the Speaker's office.
But there's still a long way to go from there. Let's find out why from Marian Enriquez.
It's been almost a month since House Secretary General Reginald Velasco confirmed that all 3 impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte have been verified. But why haven't they transmitted the documents to the office of Speaker Martin Romualdez, as some of the proponents have been demanding? Velasco admitted they had been waiting for the 4th complaint, as it will immediately garner 1/3 of lawmakers' signatures and will speed up the proceedings and send the complaint straight to the Senate. The waiting game, though, may have slowed down the process even further. The lower chamber only has this week left before they go on a break for the midterm elections campaign. The House section now says he will forward the 3 impeachment complaints to the House leadership one of these days, with or without the 4th complaint.
I think we have given them enough time, so we will have to transmit the impeachment complaints within this week.
So patay na?
Hindi naman. Ang kanta nga habang may buhay, di ba?
As per House rules, once the complaint reaches his office, the House Speaker has 10 session days to include this in the order of business and refer it to the Committee on Justice. Gabriela Partiles Representative Arlene Rosas, like several of the complainants against Duterte, is also wondering what's taking so long. She too had hoped for a 4th complaint, the delay over which she blamed on President Bongbong Marcos.
Nag-declare kasi siya ng mga kung ano-anong sinabi niya tungkol dito sa impeachment complaint, kung saan ngayon apektado yung ating mga kongresista. Hindi pwedeng mixed signals pag ganyan eh.
Malacanang said Marcos isn't blocking any ouster move and that all the president said was such an effort is just a waste of time. In the end, the palace stressed it's all up to Congress if it will go ahead with the vice president's impeachment. For News 5, I'm Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
Last Friday, we reported that various groups held a rally over at the EDSA Shrine pushing for Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment. The day after, News 5 reporter Bril Montalvo had an exclusive interview with Vice President Duterte and asked her about it.
Tulong mo na sa bayan yan. Pag nagsalita ako, magkakagulo ang bayan.
In the past, whenever she's asked about the idea of running for president, Duterte would either answer coyly or say that she had not thought about it yet. But this time, the vice president says yes, she is now seriously considering running in 2028. But she has not made up her mind as to who to endorse in this year's midterm elections.
Tinanong nila ako kung tatakbo ba daw ako ngayong 2028 at sinabi ko sa kanila, I'm seriously considering running in the 2028 presidential elections dahil sa mga nakikita natin sa bayan natin na dapat ayusin, dapat baguhin. Sa 2025 elections, pinag-iisipan ko pa kung ano yung participation ko Hindi ko alam kung makakatulong o makakasama sa mga kandidato ang pag-endorso ko sa kanila. Kaya pinag-iisipan ko yun ng maayos.
Again, that is an exclusive with News 5 reporter Bril Montalvo, who caught her in Davao, I believe.
Yeah, in Panabo City in Davao del Norte at a private event. And I think Bril has been working with
Or following her,
or covering the Dutertes for a while. So she was granted this interview. And Bril did say, because she was on StoryCon earlier, so I caught that conversation. She did say that VP Sara actually declined to answer a lot of questions. But she did answer that about 2028.
So very definite kasi sabi niya she's thinking about she's saying that she will run in 2028 but now there's a position and it's for president. So we got that clear. As to who she's going to endorse in 2025, I wonder if she'll endorse the likes of Bongo, Senator Bongo.
That's right.
Senator Bato
Because
de la
remember
Rosa.
that she did say when the whole halabalu was happening with the Quadcom hearings, with Attorney Zulaika Lopez, her chief of staff, she said, wala nang nagpapa-endorse sa akin. So it seems to be a kind of a change
Yeah.
of tune. Now that she's thinking about it, does it mean that people or politicians are actually coming up to her for her endorsement? Because the last time I heard her speak publicly on the matter, it was like those ambush interviews from that time. Ang sabi niya talaga ay, wala nang gusto magpa-endorse sa akin.
But I think it's a huge sign, that INC rally, peace rally, right? Like getting to have huge numbers out there in support of VP Sara, right? So it probably signals that she has huge influence.
That's what I was going to
that
say.
candidates can use.
Yeah, I mean, despite everything that's happened in the last 6 months, she is still the vice president, the sitting vice president. There's still a lot of political capital there. She still has her stronghold in the South. So I wouldn't discount that yet. But yeah, this is significant because she's only just come out to acknowledge this in the last month or so. In the past, of course, people have been interested as far as, even in fact, shortly after President Marcos won, right? She was already being asked, okay, what's next? Would you even consider it, et cetera, et cetera? Because back then she was the front runner, right? So now it's an open acknowledgement that yeah, she's seriously considering it, and obviously that relationship has collapsed. The Marcos Duterte relationship has collapsed. So this, in her mind, could probably be a way, forward for her family.
If I were her, I would also see that all the brouhaha over the budget, the 2025 budget, it provides her an opportunity because a lot of people are also hitting that, and so it probably, if I were VP Sara, I'd be like, okay, I see a window here of opportunity.
Well, it seems that she was very much relaxed in that interview. Like
She looked
just
really
came
good.
out of a break. I wonder if it's because of delay with the impeachment in Congress. We do know that it is about to be transmitted to the Speaker's office.
Right.
Right.
The SecGen finally spoke up today and said whether or not that fourth impeachment is going to come out, it will be transmitted this week. But I'm thinking it has to be because it's the final week of Congress.
Baka medyo
Well,
nakalinya na.
the question is, so what
VP,
happens after it gets transmitted, right? So
Because
as
they
you
go on
pointed
break.
out, that's right. They go on break from now until after the midterms, because it's the midterm. So Congress goes on session, right? So what happens then? So you transmit it, and then what, right?
I guess we'll find out because it's either going to happen tomorrow, Wednesday, or on Thursday.
It is the start of the campaign period next week, Tuesday,
Officially.
Feb 12.
and that's when the session ends, right?
Another wait and
We'll
see
keep
moment
covering.
among many. But
In the meantime, Canada, Mexico, and China are all fighting back against Trump's tariffs. We talk about the impact of this emerging trade war on the rest of the world with economist JC Punong Bayan when the big story returns. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News.
A food food security emergency on rice is now in effect. The Department of Agriculture made the announcement just this evening to curb what they call the extraordinary rise in local prices of the staple. So what does it do?
Now, this will allow DA Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel to direct the National Food Authority to release buffer stocks to government agencies, local government units, and the Kadiwa ng Pangulo program. Some 300,000 metric tons of rice from the NFA's warehouses are expected to be released to LGUs at 36 pesos a kilo. That will in turn be sold in public markets at 38 pesos a kilo. Now, this cheaper price is expected to eventually pull down commercial rice prices.
Now, before the official declaration of the food security emergency on rice, the Department of Agriculture had started selling 38 peso per kilo rice in Kadiwa stores. The agency also imposed a 58 peso per kilo maximum suggested retail price, or MSRP, for imported rice. Secretary Kiko Tiu Laurel said the food security emergency will remain in effect until the prices of rice improves. So finally, we were
Now, the
expecting to have more.
agricultural secretary is allowed to do this. Just for those who don't know, he is allowed to declare a food price emergency given two conditions. One is the supply shortage, and the other being an extraordinary rise in prices. Obviously, this case falls under the second category, right? There is sufficient supply, is what they're saying, but we're despite the president lowering the tariffs from 35% to 15% last July, we have not seen nor felt the impact of that.
And let me just add to that, though, that provision, that power given to the DA secretary, that was part of the amendments to the rice tarification law, which was done by this administration.
But I also do remember that it is also to address the amount of stock the NFA has in its warehouse, which is at 300,000 metric tons, 300,000 sacks rather, that they have to already release into the market to make way for the new harvest season.
Yes, kasi wala nang storage space for the new harvest if they don't release the buffer stock.
So it addresses both problems.
So this declaration, this food price emergency, is in place until lifted or withdrawn by the secretary, subject to review every 4 months. So again, we're talking about 38 pesos a kilo in the wet markets, should be, for local rice, because these will be sold, NFA rice will be sold to LGUs at 36 pesos a kilo.
And for those who don't go to the markets and don't have any idea, like a specific idea on how rice prices have gone up, the DA said that the prices of regular and well-milled rice remain up by exactly 19% and 20% in December of last year. That's for regular and well-milled.
Yeah.
So pretty much
You know,
20%.
so there's a question, right?
crazy.
Last year was also when that tariff cut took place. So why have we not seen the positive
impact.
effect of that?
Is it safe
right?
to say that that didn't work?
Well, there
I
must
would
be.
at this point, because we haven't felt it. I told you guys I went to the supermarket over the weekend and saw rice being sold for as high as 120 pesos a kilo. That's for imported rice.
Yes. And that the supermarket is exactly where the rice prices are the highest. Some people are saying, some analysts are saying that through the process, there's something wrong. Like perhaps it's with the distributors, that they're not cutting the margins.
It hasn't trickled down to the consumers, basically. We're still
Which is-
paying through the nose for
Right.
rice.
And it's not a new problem.
And that's the big question, isn't it? Why have prices remained stubbornly high despite the lower tariffs? And now there's this proposal to legislate an across-the-board wage hike. Now, let's try to break down these issues we have with us tonight. First up, Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry Director for Labor and Employment Services, Mr. Arturo Butch Guerrero III. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Big Story. Thanks for taking our call.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much. We invited you here today because the PSCCI released a statement today saying, well, the title of it goes, "Leave the wage determination to the regional wage boards." Talk us through what the PCCI's position is as far as the 200 peso daily minimum wage hike that's about to be legislated is concerned.
Okay. Well, good evening. And just to give you a brief background, last year, there was a call for a 150 peso wage hike. And the president said, and also the Secretary of Labor, Secretary Benny Laguesma, together with the employers, informed the public that should be left to the regional wage boards, because the regional wage boards knows better what is happening in their respective regions. And the regional wage boards are composed of the labor group, the employers group, and the government. So they would know better. And we just increased in the 18 wage boards all over the country. Only two areas did not increase wages. This was Bicol, because they were devastated with the typhoon, and Davao, because they are still in discussion on how much to increase the wage.
But the House Speaker said that back in 1989, if I am correct, that it was possible to implement a legislated wage hike without triggering inflation. He said if that was possible back then it might be possible now dahil nagkataasan na po ang mga bilihin, and it might be about time to implement a legislated wage hike. Do you think that's possible? I know you want the regional wage boards to determine that, but is it not really possible for Congress to implement something that will not be detrimental to the economy?
That's a very good question. In fact, we have not yet talked to the Speaker of the House, but what we know historically, every time we would increase wages, inflation would follow. Increasing wages would temporarily um, make the worker catch up with inflation. But in the long run, which is around 6 months to 1 year, inflation almost, and I can assure you, would follow after increasing the wages. But please remember, we just increased wages for the past years. In fact, in the 18 wage boards, if I'm not mistaken, 16 have increased their wages respectively. And these are significant increases which labor and management agreed upon. And in all the study in the ASEAN countries, we are afraid of increasing wages again because not only inflation, but also foreign direct investments would be affected, as well as the prices of goods. And it's worthy to take note that 60% of our working population is in the informal sector, and only around 40% are in the formal sector. And in the formal sector, those who can afford to increase wages are in the large scale. This would be in the bigger companies like San Miguel and the like. And they only comprise less than 1% of total business here in the country. So increasing wages across the board at 200 pesos, which is very significant, would definitely hit on inflation, would trigger massive layoffs, and this would be a lot of job losses, both informal and in the informal sector.
Director, can you talk us through, you mentioned that it would shun foreign investors if we legislated a wage hike, especially one that's 200 pesos across the board nationwide. Can you dive deeper into that and tell us exactly how that can happen?
Okay, you did your research on that. Because we are in Asia. When investors look at us, they look at not only the Philippines, but they look at us in terms of Cambodia, Malaysia, and the other countries, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand. So we have, I think right now, as of last month, December 2024, we were the second or third highest minimum wage in the ASEAN region. And when you look at industries that are highly labor necessary, like manufacturing, they would always go to a country where labor cost is low. And also to mention to your viewers, it is not only labor that is high in the Philippines, but also the cost of power. We have the highest second cost of power in the ASEAN region. So if you are an investor, you would compute your cost before going into any country, labor and power costs. And if we have one of the very high wages in the ASEAN region, we would deter from foreign direct investments coming in.
Director Butch, your statement, the PCCI statement, makes a solid argument for against rather the wage hike. Chief of which you point out that this country, the lifeblood of this country are the MSMEs who make up more than 90% of the economy.
Right.
And then you flag the risk of more of these for workers from the formal sector, employers moving the work from the formal sector towards the informal sector, and then also passing on the extra cost to consumers. Talk us through how that might happen. What are you guys worried about here?
You're correct. I think 95 or 96% of businesses are in the small and micro. It outweighs greatly the formal sector and the medium and large scale businesses. It will not happen overnight. It would happen slowly, and workers and the flow of capital would migrate from one sector to the other, and foreign direct investments would flow from one country to the other. And what we don't want to happen is the Philippines would be left behind in the development of the ASEAN region. We are not comparing ourselves with Japan and Korea because these are first world countries, especially Singapore. They're on finance and banking. But we are worried about the manufacturing sector, the investment sectors, and the other sectors would follow suit because we are all interconnected, not only in the country, but also the jobs would now flow from the formal into the informal economy, especially when the informal economy is not required to pay the minimum wage. And what we don't want to happen is the legislated wage increase would be politicized. I'm not saying that all the politicians or the legislative branch of government is doing it, but we are just cautioning the the consumers and the public that May of this year we would be having our general elections, and we don't want it to be politicized because it would affect directly the economy and the working sector of our country, especially a lot of workers and a lot of employers as well.
Director Butch, about exactly a year ago, in February of 2024, I believe this was exactly the topic we were talking about. The only difference was it was 100 pesos. That was the amount we were talking about, and now it's double that. And you guys also pushed for to leave the hikes or the termination of the hikes to the wage boards, the regional wage boards. I was just curious, in the year that has passed, did you guys take part in any stakeholder consultations? Because usually that's how, we come up with the number, especially when we're talking about it being legislated and not the wage board determining the amounts. Were you guys consulted at all?
Yes, we were consulted. In fact, we were in Congress several times. Not only the Philippine Chamber of Commerce, which is the largest voice in business, but also the semiconductor industry, the Philippine Construction Association, the Filipino Chamber of Commerce, the Philippine Association of Legitimate Service Contractors, the PhilExport, and the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, and a lot of employers. Nobody in our ranks or nobody in our groups wanted a wage increase. Please take note, it was not the 100 peso wage increase. It was a 150 peso wage increase. There was a 350 peso wage increase. There was a 500 peso wage increase. And there was even a 750 peso wage increase. So this was all, did not pass through the lower house, and it did not pass through the Senate. And all the economic managers of the president said that this would really help the economy. And even former NEDA Secretary Gerardo Sicat said, this is not good for the country in the long term. When he says in the long term, that would be around a year or 2 years down the road. We would be shooting ourselves in the foot with this increase in minimum wage.
I do know we want to attract more foreign investors into the Philippines. So, are you also saying that we should focus on, I guess, strengthening those industries where we can get more foreign investments and get more jobs in tow, vis-a-vis improving standard of living of the ordinary Filipino? I computed the wage hike that was passed last year. It is 35 pesos for NCR. If you multiply it by 26, it's just about 910 pesos a month. Medyo maliit po, no? Compare mo doon sa ito nga pong pinopropose na 200 pesos. If you multiply it by 26, it's about 5,000 pesos. We do know that's quite heavy if you multiply it by the whole workforce. But are you saying we should focus on that, like attracting more foreign investments, and that would spur larger growth for the larger population?
Well, wages is just a part of growing. It's one component, but a very big component of business, because we are required to pay our wages. Everybody works because of wages, and changing the wage structure, changing the way we increase wages, is not beneficial to all workers and employers alike. But there are other ways of attracting foreign direct investments. One would be incentives. Two would be transfer of technologies. Three would be lowering down the cost of power. Fourth would be productivity. There are a lot of things to mention that they would go down. Um, Tourism, gaining more tourists in the country is one way of increasing the economy, or stimulating the economy. So wages is a basic component of all businesses, and wages is a basic component of any business investment. So that's where we are coming from. In fact, Conweb, which is a group of textile manufacturers, lost around 16,000 jobs when they increased the minimum wage last year by an average of, you said it, 35 pesos per day. So if you're going to increase it by significantly by 200 pesos, uh, if 35 pesos, 16,000 workers were out of their jobs in one sector, can you just imagine what 200 pesos across the board would
Right.
affect the whole system?
Director Bush, just lastly and very quickly, I understand where you're coming from. This is one of those economic situations wherein, you could see both sides of the argument. On the one hand, yes, we are worried about that it may cause massive layoffs, that the small businesses will bear the brunt, and it'll be devastating for them. But on the other hand as well, the workers are also, reeling from high inflation. I mean, we all feel it. The prices at the supermarkets have not gone down, and wages have not kept up with, market standards in the last 10 years. So what, in your mind, is the best solution to this outside of leaving it to the regional wage boards?
Control inflation, bring down the prices of goods, bring down the prices of food, make it more available. And I think you're aware that there are a lot of hoarders out there trying to increase the prices of basic commodities. I think the government has enough resources to control the prices of goods, and they are doing it right now. But once the basic cost of goods and transportation are maintained, I think that would be better than increasing minimum wage, because it's going to be a chicken and egg, or a cat going after its tail. If we keep on increasing wages, that is not the answer to inflation. I think one of the answers to inflation is productivity, increasing it, and lowering the cost of basic goods, which we can do. And I think the government is doing it as well with the DTI.
Okay.
Real growth.
It's an impossible task, but we will convey that. Thank you so much for your insights tonight. PCCI Director for Labor and Employment Services, Mr. Arturo Butch Guerrero III. Thanks for your time.
All right, we'll be pausing for a really quick break, but right after that, when news and its partner media organizations come together for The Grill, a Bilang Pilipino 2025 sit-down series. First up on the hot seat was COMELEC Chairman George Garcia. Highlights of that no-holds-barred discussion when we return. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. Asian economies are reeling after U.S. President Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs on Mexico and Canada and China over the weekend, sparking a trade war. Major stock markets from Japan to South Korea were all mired in the red today, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index closing flat after being down more than 2% for the day. The hardest hit was Taiwan's TAIEX, which lost 3.5%. Taiwan is heavily dependent on global trade for its electronics exports. The local PSE index looks like an outlier as it closed up by 0.3% today, but actually, it already crashed into bear market territory last Friday after that disappointing GDP report. The peso took a beating as well, weakening to 58.66 to $1, less than 1 peso short of its all-time low. Analysts say the currency is being dragged down by weak macroeconomic data, as well as expectations that the US dollar will keep strengthening on Trump's protectionist policies. So far, no one is yet forecasting that the peso will hit 60 to the greenback. And Trump has admitted that his tariffs will cause some short-term pain for Americans. After all, three countries, Canada, Mexico, and China, announced retaliatory tariffs right after he announced it. Trump said he would meet with the leaders of Canada and Mexico today, but downplayed expectations that he will change his mind. Under his executive order, the U.S. will be slapping 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico and 10% on those coming from China. Trump also says that he will definitely impose tariffs on the European Union or on the EU as well, but he didn't say when.
How will this trade war affect the rest of the world and the Philippines is another big question. For some answers, let's bring in JC Punungbayan. He's Associate Professor at the University of the Philippines School of Economics. We're glad to have you join us again, JC, because nabitin kami with our conversation last week. And now there's another big thing to talk about, which is this trade war that was sparked over the weekend. Of course, the Philippines is not a huge exporter, and so we probably, won't see immediate impact. But how do you see this playing out for an import-reliant country like the Philippines?
Thank you, Gretchen, Regina, and Shawn, for having me back again. So this is really quite disturbing, and we're less than 2 weeks into the second Trump administration, but already we're seeing the signs of a massive trade war looming ahead of us. 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, and 10% on imports from China. This is really quite sad because for many decades, the US has been a leading advocate of free trade globally, but that has seen a major reversal in the two Trump administrations. And I'm afraid that the US economy will suffer, and not just the countries that Trump is railing against, Canada and Mexico and China, but the US as well. And many Americans don't realize that by imposing such huge tariffs on imports coming from these countries, the American consumer will end up paying for all of that. Now, as for the Philippines, the US actually turns out to be the best destination of our exports. But so far, there are no indications that Trump is going to impose large tariffs on the Philippines. We're not quite on his radar just yet, but it remains a risk moving forward.
JC, have we seen this kind of a trade war in the past? And what is the effect globally of huge changes in tariffs, such as 25%? U.S. is a global leader in terms of the economy. What would the impacts, or how would we feel the immediate impacts, you think?
Well, I think we should expect many think tanks and multilateral organizations to forecast global economic trade to slow down this year because of steep increase in tariffs. This is not the first time that the U.S. has embarked on such a trade war, but for decades, again, the U.S. has actually learned its lessons. It's not just the smaller countries that are going to suffer, but consumers as well and the American economy. But I don't think that Trump realizes that. And I think there's a survey recently showing that less than half of the US population actually knows what the tariff is. in the first place. It's really sad state of affairs, and we're going to feel the pinch in one way or another.
Outside the posturing, what do you think the goal of Trump is? I mean, I've been watching several reports, and the American businesses say there is no other source of goods. Like, for example, they get a lot of imports from China, they sell it to the American market, and they don't have other sources that would be competitive inside the United States. I mean, what do you think is he trying to achieve here?
Well, I think, Gretchen, one of the main narratives is that Trump touts tariffs as a way to punish, quote unquote, punish many other countries that have, again, quote unquote, stolen American jobs and really put down the US economy. But again, this comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of protectionism, tariffs, and global trade. I'm afraid that this time around, the Republicans surrounding Trump are really quite organized, and there are no strong voices in the opposition, or at least among his cabinet, that are warning him about the major fallout from this protectionist wave. I think that's the main source, or that's the main line in his narrative, a way to punish other countries and put the U.S. again as the top country of the world, or assert its power in the world.
JC, I would tend to agree with you because just listening to the amount, like 25% with Canada, who is like the biggest trading partner of 36 states, I think. Mexico, their biggest trading partner, and of course China, who everyone gets raw materials from. It would sound like, did nobody brief him on this? So do you think that there's a chance that he could walk back on this, because that's the same thing to do?
Actually, I have many relatives who voted for Trump, and they're completely in line with, yeah, actually some even very close relatives. But I think some Americans need to feel the pain to learn the lessons the hard way, I guess. And the sad thing is that actually Canada and Mexico have been pushed to the wall and are now planning to set up retaliatory tariffs. So this is similar to what had happened back during the first Trump administration, where there was a raging trade war between the US and China. But now it's the US versus Canada and Mexico and China. But unfortunately, of course, these smaller economies will want to assert themselves, that there are no pushovers given the bullying of the US. But I'm afraid that the retaliatory tariffs will also hurt them at the same time that it hurts the US. So again, this points to the overall lesson that nobody really wins in a trade war, but I don't think many Americans realize the coming implications.
Okay, since Justin Trudeau was the most specific so far as of this airing, what did you think of his quote-unquote retaliation? And what are the possible impacts of that if he does, pag tinuloy niya yung kanyang threat?
Well, I think we should observe the retaliatory tariffs or strategies of these other countries. In the case of Canada, I think one major leverage on their part is that much of the oil that is imported by the US actually comes from Canada. But Justin Trudeau has stopped short of pulling in the big guns and actually halting all exports of oil to the US. But I think that's a major bargaining chip on their end. Now, as for Mexico, I think they have a totally different strategy when it comes to this. They are planning retaliatory tariffs, but I think it's on different commodities, and I think there's an angle about the drug cartels and the drug issue surrounding the US-Mexico border. So it's going to be different strategies depending on the leadership in these countries that the US is attacking.
But JC, the big question, albeit in the probably medium to longer term, is whether all of this will worsen inflation in the Philippines, right? By way of messing up the supply chains, just like how we saw and painfully lived through during the COVID pandemic. Again, we may not be a country in the line of sight of President Trump, but we are heavily reliant on imports. And then secondary to that, I don't know if you caught our conversation earlier with the PCCI Director Guerrero, but you know, then there's other issues around, right? The fact that the price of rice has remained stubbornly high despite the tariff cut, and also the fact that there is a very persistent bill in Congress right now pushing for the 100 peso wage hike. Sorry, 200 peso daily wage hike, not 100 peso. All of these combined, again, these are what we call in economics dark clouds on the horizon. But what are you seeing? Talk us through some silver lining here.
I hate to share some silver lining when I myself can't see it, but I think we're not going to expect so much inflation to arise from the uh, uh, emerging trade war between the U.S. and other countries. The factors behind inflation in the Philippines are really quite different. Rice, for example, has a disproportionate impact on domestic inflation. And we saw in the last couple of months that at least before inflation went on the downtrend, almost half of inflation was due to rice, and much of that was due to rice as a specific commodity. So it's really quite important for us to get a rice policy right. And then as for the possible inflationary impact of the 200 peso daily wage hike, this is much larger compared to the previous proposals of daily wage hikes. And of course, entrepreneurs, the business sector will push back on it hard. But let's see where it will bring us.
Uh, what do you think? I'd hate to capitalize on other people's misery or what's happening, the dark clouds over them. But what opportunities do you see here for the Philippines as probably an export market? Because we do know we are a net importing market. Maybe we could send some products over to the West, or we could be possibly a source for raw materials. I mean, thinking along those lines, what opportunities do we see here for the Philippines?
Well, a long time problem, Gretchen, in the Philippines is that our trading sector is not very diversified. So when you look at the main exports of the Philippines, which is semiconductors, integrated chips, these are also our biggest imports. And this has been a stylized fact for many, many years. So what that means is that we're bringing in not raw materials, but intermediate goods. So you can imagine the chips coming into the Philippines. We assemble them a bit and then export them again outside of the country. But we're not quite able to produce smartphones, iPhones, MacBooks, laptops, etc., to the extent that Vietnam can, for example. So I think that's one major problem of trying to strengthen the Philippine economy when we are not able to introduce high value added to many of our exports. And we continue to export many goods, agricultural commodities like coconut, mangoes, etc., that have inherently low value added. So I think this is one of the major challenges moving forward. How do we emulate or copy the success of surrounding economies such as Vietnam that has been able to diversify its exports quite significantly in the past couple of decades? If we're not able to do that, then I'm afraid that the Philippine economy will continue to lag behind many ASEAN economies in the coming years.
The thing is, though, JC, I mean, if we're gonna take it to, like that argument, our system is just completely different from most of our ASEAN peers. And how do we even try to accomplish that economically when politically we are like so different? Right, it would be much harder to, just for someone to put their foot down and say, do this, do that. It has to be like this.
Well, I don't think, Sean, that it's impossible for the Philippines to grow quite fast in the coming decades. But I think what's important is that we're able to attract many foreign direct investments that can boost domestic manufacturing and diversify our exports. For example, in the early 2000s, Vietnam was able to attract many multilateral companies such as Samsung, Apple into its shores. And by doing so, they have been able to produce significantly more jobs, high-paying jobs in manufacturing and industry. And I think that's one of the keys to success moving forward for the Philippines. However, for many reasons, like the weak rule of law, the lack of proper infrastructure, the high cost of power, etc., many possible or prospective investors are choosing to locate outside of the Philippines into India or Vietnam and not in the Philippines. So I think again that points to the necessity for the Philippine government to find ways to make the Philippines a lot more attractive for these foreign investors, because we should accept the fact that there's not enough saving in the Philippines. We can't expect to produce or to generate or make multinational companies with the same success as Samsung or Apple coming only from our shores. We need the help of these foreign investments in order to accelerate Philippine growth in the future. But the sad reality is that we're not able to attract them and they're going elsewhere.
And in that vein, actually, I saw your Facebook post over the weekend showing that the Philippines is now on a permanently lower GDP path. You're saying basically COVID, the pandemic scarred the economy permanently. Talk us through that quickly, JC. What are you seeing? We've got about a minute.
Yes, the reality is that many other economies have been able to go back to their pre-pandemic trajectories. But the Philippines now seems to be on a totally different plane or horizon. And for us to go back to the pre-pandemic trajectory by the end of the Marcos administration, I crunched the numbers, and we will need annual growth of about 11.4%, which is more than twice the growth rate that we saw for 2024. So basically, that's impossible. And I think this is emerging or turning out to be one of the major economic legacies of the Marcos administration. Despite promises of going back to the pre-pandemic trajectory, we're not able to do that until 2028. So that will have to happen after the Marcos administration, which is quite sad because that means that we will continue to lag behind many of our more successful ASEAN neighbors.
Wow, that's such a sobering and somber assessment. But
sorry.
No, but thank you for crunching the numbers.
I tend to do that.
Thank you for crunching the numbers. We have something to go by now. Every quarter, when we talk to the economic managers, they'll say 5.2% is still amongst the fastest in Southeast Asia. But look, we would actually need 11%, upwards of 11%, as you said.
11.4% to be exact.
11.4%.
I do remember the president saying in his State of the Nation address, the economy is sound. It does not look like it is at this point.
Thank you so much for your assessment and insights, as always. Professor J.C. Punungbayan of the UP School of Economics. We'll leave it there for now.
Well, last Saturday, we had the opportunity to sit down with COMELEC Chairman George Garcia for a no-holds-barred discussion about the upcoming elections. Here's mobile journalist Marimon Reyes with highlights from the grill.
Top news reporters and anchors of News 5, One News, One PH, The Philippine Star, Business World, The Free Man and True FM turned out in full force for an in-depth sit-down interview with COMELEC Chairman George Garcia. In the 2-hour-long conversation, Garcia took their questions head-on, tackling everything from how to rein in premature campaigning to what it will take to enact an anti-dynasty law. Acknowledging the rise of social media influencers in this electoral cycle, Garcia said the COMELEC is working with and keeping a close eye on digital platforms such as TikTok, Meta, and Google.
Nagkaroon na rin po kami ng agreement naman doon sa dalawa pang malalaki katulad ng Meta and Google. So kahit paano doon, pwede namin gawing basihan na yon. Sila naman na nag-commit, will not allow the so-called political ads.
Yun yung hindi ko maintindihan. Sabi mo, fair ang batas, pero parang na-nullify na yung premature campaigning. Kasi magiging kandidato ka lang upon start of the campaign period.
I mean, lahat naman tayo, we see all the posters, tarpaulins, billboards.
Ako personally, ang sakit at sama ng loob ko dyan. Kaya lang, minsan, masama ang loob mo, hindi ka naniniwala. Kaya lang, yun ang batas, yun ang role namin to enforce and administer election laws.
Garcia announced that a new set of guidelines over the reporting on the Statement of Contributions and Expenditures, or SOSE, will also be released this week. The biggest change is that candidates' SOSEs will now be posted online, with the COMELEC encouraging all voters to help scrutinize these and report them any questionable campaigning.
Apply ba yan, Chairman, sa mga national candidates? Kasi, tama, pag mga barangay, ganun, medyo close quarters kayo, magkakaibigan, magkakakilala kayong lahat. Pero pagdating sa national,
Ang laki na talaga.
Ngayon po kahit picture lang, kita niyo po, pinupuntahan, pinapasyokos namin. Napaka-importante po yan na at least the COMELEC is now active.
Other new initiatives for the May midterm elections include the rollout of online voting for overseas and PWD voters and converting public spaces into voting precincts for the comfort of voters and preservation of public school utilities.
Ngayon po, although wala pa doon, pero ngayon po lahat ng mga botante natin, yung mga pangalan nila sa labas ng presinto may pictures. Meron na. Sinigurado namin yung nag-violate ng data privacy, pero may pictures colored. Kasi mas nakita po namin, mas sinaharap nila yung mukha nila kaysa yung pangalan.
February 11 marks the beginning of senatorial and party list candidates' campaign, while March 28 is the start of the campaign period for those gunning for the House of Representatives and parliamentary, provincial, city, and municipal offices. Overseas voting will be done from April 13 to May 12, while local absentee voting will be from April 28 until 30, with the main election day on May 12. Mobile journalist Marimon Reyes, we are One News.
The Senate has approved on third and final reading House Bill 10926, which seeks to extend Meralco's franchise by another 25 years. 18 senators voted in favor, while only Senator Risa Ontiveros voted against. No one abstained. Meralco is the largest electricity distributor in the country, serving 38 cities and 78 municipalities, covering about 7.6 million customers. Meralco's current franchise ends by 2028, and the prompt approval of this bill aims to ensure uninterrupted power supply across its service areas. Following this, the Senate and House versions will now be reconciled in a bicameral committee, then sent to the President for his signature.
And now this, the basketball community is still reeling from the shockwaves of the Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis trade. Now that happened Sunday morning Manila time. However, the new Lakers man is slowly coming to terms with it. And our big picture tonight is Luka's heartfelt message to Dallas, which he posted on X. The first paragraph partly reads, and I quote, "I wanted so badly to bring you a championship." Doncic went on with, "The love and support you all have given me is more than I could have ever dreamed of. For a young kid from Slovenia coming to the U.S. for the first time, you made North Texas feel like home." Luka spent 6.5 years of his NBA career with the Mavericks.
Parang yung yung trade war. Sent shocks to the market.
This is the sports trade war.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
and it was so shocking. It was all anyone could talk about yesterday.
Sabi ni Shams Charania, I listened to his
The
video.
ESPN anchor.
Sabi niya because si Luka daw is 25 years old. So the Lakers need somebody to build their franchise around.
Right.
Whereas the Dallas Mavericks will probably want a championship now with AD being 31, Kyrie also being around that age. Tapos nandun pa si Klay Thompson. So medyo mas older batch to.
Pero may mga argument din na parang that's not how you build a team. Yung parang kumbaga kukuha na lang ng mga superstar tapos you expect it to just work like that. I mean,
not even asked LeBron about it.
Even LeBron was shocked.
Yes, exactly. He wasn't even consulted, apparently.
Diba?
I don't know. I don't own an NBA franchise, so I don't know. But one person who was copying the flag, unfairly was Mark Cuban, because actually he's divested his majority stake already from the Dallas Mavericks. That's something a lot of people don't know. He actually sold it to the owners of the Sands Casino.
Okay, ganito na lang. Let's end this show.
Okay, because we know people who can talk about it.
Yes! So that's it for the big story tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.